Greetings and welcome to another episode of Sundays with Dr. J, better known as, I bet you can't remember, Super Speak Sundays with Dr. James Dix, the orator. This is the place where we highlight the lives of those who are ordinary, who have gone on to do extraordinary things. We want to thank each of you for your time, your commitment to watching these videos. We want to continue to encourage you to make sure you go to our website and go to our YouTube page and go to our Facebook page and like and share and make sure that you subscribe to our channel, because that is how we get the word out and how we make a difference in this world in which we live. I hope everybody's doing well. This is a Sunday, and I know this is a time for everybody to relax, but we really want to highlight our next guest. We have a really special guest. I know that we always say we got a special guest, but again, the folks who are on Super Speak Sundays have been handpicked by me. These are folks who have been inspirational in my life. I've watched them from afar, and they just mean so much to me. Our guest today is Dr. Keith A. Robinson, and we're going to read his bio so you can just hear a little bit about Dr. Robinson. Dr. Keith Robinson, a native from Gary, Indiana, is currently serving in his 27th year of education. Most recently, he was named Associate Principal for Educational Services in 2017 at Evanston Township High School. Prior to joining ETHS, he served as the assistant principal of operations at Niles North High School in Skokie, Illinois. He also previously taught high school English for a decade in Gary, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Evanston. Dr. Robinson is a proud member of, the Q Sci-Fi. Where my dog's at, Dr. Robinson holds an EDD. He's a doctor of education in educational leadership in 2014 from National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois. He also has a master's in educational administration and supervision from Roosevelt University in Chicago, and a bachelor's of science in secondary education from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. Dr. Robinson's commitment to social justice, proactive student interventions, and academic, behavioral, and social emotional support informs his leadership within the organization. In his spare time, Dr. Robinson also serves as the first, let me say that again, the first Black trustee in the village of Skokie and other nonprofit boards in the community. Dr. Robinson lives in Evanston with his wife, Sharon. She's also a Gary native, Gary, Indiana, the home of Michael Jackson and Big Dog Robinson. You all know who that is, Glenn Robinson. And their two teen daughters, Taryn and Carrie. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our guest, Dr. Keith A. Robinson. Dr. Robinson, how you doing?
What's up, Brother Dix? Nice to see you. So
All
happy
right.
to be part of the show.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, thank you for joining Super Speak Sundays. This is, this show again it gives an opportunity to highlight, ordinary people who have gone on to do extraordinary things. And, based on your bio and what I know about you, you have definitely taken the reins and you're doing some extraordinary things. Anytime you're working with young people to shape their lives and their futures, you can't say enough about that. Traditionally, what we do on the show when we first start, we have a quote that we're going to show here. I'm going to read it, and when we read the quote, we just want to get your perspective regarding what this quote means to you. All right?
Yeah.
So the quote says, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all," and that's by Aristotle. Again, we'll read that again. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. What are your thoughts?
You know what? I think great quote. First time I've actually heard that quote from Aristotle, but it definitely does resonate with the work that I've done because I think, and you and I can both share this old notion of being from a humble place. That we, I would argue that our schooling in Gary, Indiana, was probably not the highest rating. Uh,
Right.
but
Right.
I think the folks and friends and family that I met through that experience,
Right.
the most kind, generous, thoughtful people that still, remains true and dear to who I am today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I definitely agree with you. I mean, growing up in Gary was, you know, again, before we came on live, we just kind of talked about, those humble beginnings of thinking that we were in one place when, we didn't even know that the world outside of there existed. And so I think that in itself has opened, I think, our eyes, and it's taken
Yeah.
our blinders off so we can see that that the world is larger than just the state of Indiana, Illinois, not even I mean even the Midwest.
Mhm.
Let's go back and talk about Gary, Indiana, and what that meant for you. I mean, what was that like growing up for you? Home life, all that good stuff.
Man, Jimmy, it was great. You know, it was my reality. It was my norm. Back then you don't know what you don't know.
Right,
And
right.
I think because my parents did the best that they could do. They put us in the best place and situation they thought was best for us at the time. So I grew up in Midtown, um, right off 20th in Pennsylvania, uh,
Hmm.
which was great. We had a sense of community there. Started out going to Williams Elementary School, which really cemented the foundation of my education. Met some great friends, back then. Uh,
Yeah.
I tell you what I remember. What I Sorry about that. What I remember mostly growing up is, man, we moved like every 2 years,
Wow.
um, which again, for me, it was a reality, but never really had a place, one particular place to call our own. And I didn't know a lot of people, to be honest, who stayed
Mhm.
in the same house, for an extended period of years. A lot of my friends kind of moved around. I started Pulaski, uh,
Hmm.
and then shortly after we started, I remember we moved out to Glen Park. uh,
Okay.
Out to Glen Park, started going to school at Bailey, where I met, some of my dearest friends to this day. Uh,
Right.
Ended up finishing up at Lewallis High School, which again had such a major impact on who I am, uh,
Right.
and just kind of launched from there. But Gary was something special, man.
It
A lot
was. It
of
was.
memories, a lot of silly things that I recall doing,
Yeah.
because we just, you know it was different. It was a
Yeah. It
different
was. It
time, a
was.
different
It
place.
was.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. When you were a child, of course, you're an educator now, and you've reached the pinnacle of your career. I mean, you're a EDD. I mean, you have a doctorate. But go back to when you were in school. I mean, did you have any inkling of, what you wanted to be, or what, I mean, how did education become, your go-to?
Hey, Jimmy, that's a really good question. And if I'm 100% honest, never thought I would be in education at all. Never.
Mm,
I used to love to tinker with things, taking things apart and putting things back together. But like so many of my other friends, my aspirations and goals were to go to the service. You know,
mm-hmm. Right.
I thought that was going to be my deal. Both of my parents dropped out of high school, so I didn't really, they didn't really say, I think they really wanted me to go to college,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that meant, to continue my education
Right.
wherever
Right. Right.
that was, but they certainly didn't have the experience, like so many, again, of my friends, about what college was and
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But
Right.
make a long story short, I remember senior year, and I'm saying this because right now I have a senior daughter,
Right. Right.
kind
Right.
of walking through this process with her. I remember senior year, It must have been in the spring, where I had already been meeting with some Navy recruiters,
Yep.
and they say, "Hey, all right, let's go it. We'll go to MEPS in Chicago. We'll get you
Mm-hmm.
sworn in. Get that ASVAB scored. You'll go through, and
Right.
we'll ship you off for basic training." So
Right.
man, I was excited. I was excited. I got woke up early that morning with a recruiter. Remember going to Chicago,
Yep.
and I also remember hitting this. There was like a group of birds that just kind of came down on the highway, and I remember the car hitting these birds, which like
Wow.
seemed to explode,
Wow.
from
Wow.
the
Wow.
front of the car. It's crazy that I remember those things, but I remember going to the place where we were to be sworn in and
Right.
go
Right.
through that. And man, I didn't pass the medical examination.
Mm.
When I was a kid, I was hospitalized for asthma. So they learned of that and literally stopped the whole process.
Really.
Jim, I was devastated. When I say devastated,
Yeah.
I knew I had to get out of there. I had friends who unfortunately were, left uh, for whatever, whether they were harmed or
Right.
killed or whatever it was. But, during that time, it wasn't, I wasn't in a good space either. And
Right.
I was thinking, traveling the world would kind of put me mentally and physically in a safer
Sure.
place,
Sure.
that
Sure.
I qualified safe at the time. Um, but also, opened my eyes to some experiences that I didn't have. So man,
Wow.
that was a
Wow.
long day and a
I
long
bet.
ride home,
I
knowing that I
bet.
wasn't going to be able to do it.
Yeah, because I'm sure hitting those birds and all these different things. I don't know if you believe in signs and stuff, but I mean all those things happening, and then having to come home and face the reality that you don't have a plan, pretty much.
Senior year, all right, in the spring, my daughter, she's been knowing, and they've been planning for her whole life for this. So I go back on my way back. I'm like, man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I guess maybe I'll go to college. Now listen,
Right.
I didn't take one college prep course.
Hmm.
Never took an honors class, AP course, because I never had aspirations on going to
Right.
college. I did the career center thing. I went over to the career center and honed skills in printing, and
Hmm.
was doing some part-time work at the Gary Post Tribune. So, as a paste up and layout artist. So all these little odd end jobs, I thought I was going to somehow just kind of find a skill, lean into the skill, and catapult, my life. But I figured I'd try to get into a college. 2.3 GPA.
Right.
All right.
Right. Right.
Jim, I had no idea what to do. I applied for like Notre Dame, IU, Purdue, all these major, amazing institutions.
Hmm.
And I had no clue even what it meant to apply to these universities. Of course, I wasn't qualified for these places,
Yeah.
which I think is what put the chip on my shoulder, uh,
Right.
as far as getting into to education.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. When of course you are surrounded around a lot of students, and you get a chance to measure, self-esteem in students. When you think back to your own life, and where you were in terms of your self-awareness and self-esteem. I mean, talk a little bit about that, and how that whole transformation worked for you.
But Jim, we grew up in Gary, very what I would qualify as a very homogenous community, urban center.
Right.
I think the oneness, knowing that we were all in the same boat together, is what really cemented a lot of my identity. I'm biracial.
Hmm.
I was white. I was raised by a white mother with a divorced, family. So growing up in this urban center really, um, you know, that homogenous community made me who I am.
Yeah.
When I went back to Gary, I was able to relate to a lot of the students there. same situation. But shortly, Gary Roosevelt High School is the first place where I taught. I was riffed, which seemed to be kind of just what they did to first year teachers back then. I didn't, again, quite know what that meant. So I went to Indianapolis, where I was so fortunate enough to be able to work and coach at Pike High School. So again, when you're talking about identifying with students, um, in these different spaces, everywhere that I've gone to teach, whether it was Gary, obviously, Indianapolis, Chicago, and even in Evanston, and even serving as an administrator in some of the other schools,
Mm-hmm.
how a Gary kid finds their way into the building.
Wow.
Isn't
Wow.
that interesting?
Yeah, it is. It is.
So,
Talk about so you mentioned that your mother is white.
mhm.
What growing up in a household as a biracial child and then having a white mother, what words of wisdom did she give you growing up in an urban community?
I grew up black. That
Okay.
was my identity. I didn't grow up as a biracial person. I think um, for me, when you have that biracial experience, you're the experiences on both sides of the family.
Hmm.
The cultures from both sides. That was absent for me. I really didn't have a relationship uh, with the white side of my family until much older,
Hmm.
where I met my aunts and uncles and grandparents. I always knew my grandmother, but I met my grandfather. I was in my late 40s.
Wow.
So really didn't identify much as a biracial person. Um, didn't know many biracial people in Gary,
Right.
so I just didn't have that identity.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So now you get to Ball State. So you applied to all these different schools, Notre Dame and Oklahoma and all these big time schools with a 2.3, which I had a 2.3 as well. So don't feel bad. And I also ended up at Ball State. So maybe Ball State was just that place that was like, we're gonna accept all these kids from Gary, Indiana, who are who are subpar with their grades. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
so you get to Ball State, and then what happens? What is your major when you first go into school?
So I was placed in the remediation program.
Hmm.
I didn't meet any targets academically
Hmm.
to jump right into the program. So I remember vividly that first semester, um, sitting in class, struggling. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
spoke differently. I learned differently. I behaved differently. I didn't
Hmm.
know how to be a student,
Right.
and I was so angry with how I learned and was schooled that I decided to be an English teacher
Okay.
because I was told I couldn't write. I was told I couldn't speak. I said, and Miss Craig was one of my favorite English teachers at Lew Wallace
Yeah.
High School,
Yeah.
and she always made me feel, good. There's an old saying: you don't remember the grades in high school, but you
Hmm.
remember the relationships
That's
that
it.
you build.
That's
So
it.
I remember fond relationships with Miss Craig, and not that I got straight A's in English, but it was
Right.
an enjoyable class. So I figured perhaps I'll major in English, declare that as a major, and eventually maybe coach something. But going back to high school was a cool thing to me because I think in the end, even when I go back and think of how I felt in a school,
Hmm.
it was a place of safety. It was a place of normalcy,
Right. Right.
and I think that as a kid, I found great comfort in that.
Wow. Wow. That's great, man. That's great. So you leave Ball State, and then you get these jobs, working and all this. And so how did you decide to go back to pursue a master's and P? I mean, talk about how you get on this education journey, because let's not forget you're from a school system that did. I'm putting words in your mouth, but maybe you feel like they did not prepare you. You
Yeah.
know, I can remember walking in Ball State, and walking into a room full of 300 students and feeling like, I don't know anything about the stuff they're talking about.
Well, not only 300 students, Jimmy, but 300 white people.
Right, right,
So
right,
so we also have that duality of going to school with other people, different people,
right,
than we were used to. So you're talking about a clash of a culture that we had not experienced. Even the white woman who was in my house
right.
was nothing like the white people that I met when I went to Ball
Exactly,
State. Yeah.
exactly. Wow. So, yeah, talk about the journey let's talk about the pinnacle. How do you decide to go back to get the doctorate?
Yeah. So I taught for several years, and I was like, man, I felt that I was pretty good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
I understood it. I could relate to kids, going back to that whole notion of relationships, creating memories, creating experiences that engage students differently. What we were reading, being able to select the material that we were reading, teaching students, unlike the way I was taught, was really became fascinating to me, and learning how to be a student. So I was kind of going through this process myself, a lot of times with the students. They're transitioning and evolving as students, and I am transitioning and evolving as a student and a teacher. So it was great. And I think if you talk to any administrator, we get to the point where, well, I can say I'll speak
Right,
for myself. I got to the point where I was like, man, I can do that.
right,
I can do that, might be better than that person did. Or, man, if I did this,
right.
and perhaps, I can, I'll be able to initiate and do things a little differently. So I became pretty passionate about that. I was married back in 1998.
Hmm.
My wife was doing training, and while she was doing her training, I said, man, this is the best time to go back and get a master's degree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, that was shortly after one of my best friends was murdered.
Hmm.
So he didn't get a chance to finish his degree. So
Right.
I kind of took on this baton and said, you know what, I got my first one for me. Let me get this second one for him.
Wow.
And my doctorate degree, I just, you just feel like, for my family,
Yeah. I know
again.
the feeling. I know the feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I know the feeling.
that they inspired me. My family inspired me, um, directly or indirectly,
Right.
as well as people that I served with, that I spoke with, and my students.
Okay. Man, you have so you haven't forgotten about the people who were in your life back in the day. And I think I remember you talking about the murder. There's a lack of black men in education, of course. Do you ever feel the urge to go to some of these urban centers to give your time, or I mean, do you have the urge to go back to those communities?
I mean, I am that community,
Right, right, right,
so when you, well, the urge is always to serve for me. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to find ways of maintaining a great connection. Uh, I think as an educator, we're in it. We're
right,
in the thick of it.
right,
This is a microcosm of any community when you're in a high school. Um, but I have found ways to continue to serve in different capacities on different boards
good,
that
good,
are doing tremendous work, in the community. And for me, the work is the good work has some leg or component to academics, and empathy,
right,
care, and concern. And so I've always been a part of those as well. And of course, a big piece of my identity is the fraternity as well.
right. Oh yeah,
Understanding the tenets and of what we believe as
right.
Omega Men, uh,
That's it. That's it.
has continued to be a guiding light and all the work that.
Absolutely. 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 You know, so there's someone who's probably watching, maybe a mother or father who has a child, and they don't know which way to go in terms of, preparing their child for, the next level. If their child wants to, go to college or whatever they want to do, what recommendations would you have? You're a high school principal. What recommendations do you have for parents? Let's just say that we have a parent who has a child that's in ninth grade. What types of things should they be doing right now to prepare the child for transitioning to college?
I think the most important thing that any parent can do is support their kid. All right, support who they are as a person, support their identity, how they identify, and really, what I would call feed the beast. Try to find the interest that they have and feed it. Um, and oftentimes kids don't know what the heck they want to do.
Right, right,
So, for me, it was always a rule of thumb in my house with my children to do something academic, something artistic, and something athletic. So those are kind of the three A's that we tried to make sure and instill in it's small when they were little.
hmm
Let's find something to support all those different legs. And I tell you, by the ninth grade, a lot of habits have already been formed.
right,
So I would definitely encourage parents to, as early as they can, read to your kid, get your kid some structure, get them try to explore interests that they may have. They don't know. Some of the things that my kids, my girls, enjoyed, I had no idea. But it's not until you allow them to explore, if you can. Uh,
right.
but I also know that there's support. Um, there's always financial support and grants, and
Oh yeah,
so especially now, there's just a lot of support to be able to do it. So I just don't want parents to think that there are barriers for them, for their students or their kids to not, explore some interests that they may have.
oh absolutely, absolutely. We're going to transition. Last thing, you are a new, um, you are on the board at
Yeah.
Skokie. You are. I'll let you tell us. What are you? I mean, what are you doing in Skokie? I
Yes.
read it. I read it in the intro. I can't
I'm,
remember.
I'm a village trustee. A village.
Trustee. Okay, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what. So you're the first black
Yeah.
man ever in Skokie to um, be appointed or voted into this position.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience.
I was elected into the position last year.
Elected. Okay.
So, um, George Floyd did a number on me, Jimmy. I live in a community that's super active, um, very committed. There's a social justice is super important here. I always have been with me, but I think when you're in a community when so many people are really trying to do the right thing, iron sharpens iron.
That's it. That's
So
it.
it really stands to motivate, encourage, inspire. You do that to one another, and you form this tidal wave of just support. And I think in my particular experience, I remember talking to my neighbor. I've been to so many different marches and postings and having conversations with people, but I said, man, I feel like I need to do more.
Right.
I'm serving in a school. I'm serving on these boards. Think I'm pretty active. I think people know who I am. I've, as a more than 25-year educator, I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
an opportunity to really do some good work.
Right.
But I felt this urge to do more. So I began to explore. Why I've never thought about politics.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
never, man. I don't understand structure. I didn't understand any of that.
Right.
It was never an interest to me to serve at that level. So I got in contact with our village government, and I went through, what inspired me and what I felt the need to do, and really asked, how can I serve? How can I
Wow.
how
Wow.
can I bring the most,
Right.
unique experience? How can I bring the most to a community where I could be in a position to really help and kind of
Right.
move the needle, especially for racial justice and social
Right.
justice. Um, so I served on a commission.
Wow.
So that was
Wow.
kind of my introduction into to government.
Okay.
So shortly after that, man, I learned so much, and I tell you, there is a parallel structure
Hmm.
in village government and school systems.
Okay.
You have your superintendent, you have your mayor, you have your village heads, you have your associate or assistant principals, you have your school safety, you have the arm of the police department. You follow me?
Oh yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of structures that for me I was able to formulate some parallels where I really began to understand a little bit better some of the nuts and bolts. And
Wow.
this is my 17th year as an administrator.
Wow.
So I think wearing that administrative hat and just navigating conversations with people and community and
Yeah.
parents, they've also that experience also I think gave me this kind of breadth and depth to really understand things in a different level. And eventually, I was able to talk, with a caucus in town,
Right.
and they vetted me, and I was able to get on the slate and
Wow. Wow. That's
for
exciting.
us to be able to serve the community.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gil Scott Heron talks about who will pay reparations for my soul. And I know that in your area, if
Mhm.
I'm not mistaken, tell me if I'm wrong,
You're right.
your city was it the very first that started to pay reparations?
Yeah. So where I live on this border between like in Evanston and Skokie, where
Hmm.
technically Skokie, but I work and serve. I serve both communities.
Right,
One,
right.
but where I teach is Evanston, and yes, Evanston is the first community in the country that have figured out a way for reparations to be paid for to the black um, firsts here, in town with redlining, and
Wow.
it's a really interesting community here.
I
Uh,
bet.
I
I
enjoy.
bet.
Yeah,
So how many checks have you received?
I'm not from Jim. I'm from Gary, man. Hey, I don't know if the government in Gary is also looking at trying to do some reparations, but uh, Lord knows I've had a lot of houses. Well,
Yeah.
I've lived in a lot of homes in Gary, but yeah, it's interesting. And my thoughts on that is a great start.
Yeah. So reparations. I mean, where do you see reparations in the next 5 years? I mean, in this country.
Man, Jimmy, I don't know, man. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
I hate to say that it's just kind of monolithic and looking at just cash flow.
Yeah. Right.
Because I think the disconnect with the black community historically, we're so behind,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
access and information. I think just money won't do it.
Right.
So there's got to
Right.
be, to me, just a whole systemic structure to really create, because the system that we have is not for us.
Wow. Hey
We've
man, that's great. Yeah. 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 I feel you on that.
yeah.
Last point before we get out of here. There's a young man or a young lady who's watching this, sitting down with their parents, and they are in an urban community. The school system may not be that great, and they want to be great, but they don't know how to get there. Final words.
I think it goes back to care and concern. I think the X's and O's and the technical piece of what it looks like to be successful it isn't always academic. I think for me that was kind of a byproduct.
Hmm.
So I would say, to really go back and just connect with the humanity uh, of people,
Right.
hope and care and love people for who they are. I think the other pieces of that will fall in place, but we can't get away from our humanity.
And I think that wraps us up with that the quote kind of I think you bundled it up real nice. It takes us back to our original quote. Dr. Robinson, we thank you. We thank you for joining us here on Super Speak Sundays today. Your words, I think, pierced us, and it definitely gave me some motivation, some things to think about. I have a ninth grader in school right now, and we have three more years. Not hard, I mean, three
Yeah,
more years.
yeah, yeah.
And so, so the words that you have shared today will definitely impact the lives of our listeners, and that's ultimately why we have this platform. Again, you are definitely someone who was an ordinary guy who came from Gary, Indiana, but you are doing some extraordinary things, and that's why we do this. We're here to inspire. We're here to transform the mind, body, and soul of our listeners. And so again, we thank you for taking the time. I know you got to get back to work, but hey, root to the good bros.
Hey,
Talk to you
love you,
soon.
bro. Appreciate
Love,
it.
love you too, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
All right, take care. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I know I'm full. I don't know about you, but Dr. Robinson definitely gave us some things to think about today. If you have a young child who is seeking some direction, I'm sure Dr. Robinson will be more than happy. He can be contacted very easily. You can just contact me and I can get you in touch. But he is someone who I consider to be a major player. I've watched his growth and development over time, and he is just he's a phenomenal individual. Again, we thank you for joining us here at Super Speak Sundays. I'm your host, James the Orator. Until next time, peace, love, and more love.